My son-in-law locked me out in the street during a severe storm, smiling through the window as I shivered in the cold, teaching me to know my place. While he laughed at my warnings, I stood soaked in the darkness of the forest, pondering my response. But after just 2 phone calls, his confidence began to crumble. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Freeman's palm slammed my phone face down against the kitchen table, cutting me off mid-sentence about wind speeds. The device skittered across the wood surface like a wounded insect. The National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Saturday afternoon, I continued, reaching for the phone. Wind speeds up to 70 miles per hour, possible. Clark, you're turning into a paranoid old man. Freeman's voice boomed across Julie's kitchen. He paced behind the counter like a caged animal, his expensive polo shirt stretched tight across his expanding gut. We've been planning this cabin trip for weeks. Julie stood frozen between us, clutching 2 coffee mugs against her chest. Steam rose from the ceramic surfaces, fogging her reading glasses. The familiar crease appeared between her eyebrows, the same worried expression she'd worn as a child when her mother and I argued about money. I flipped my phone over, revealing the weather radar's angry red and orange swirls. Look at this system. It's massive. The storm will hit the mountains exactly when we're supposed to arrive. Freeman stopped pacing and leaned across the counter, his wedding ring clicking against the granite. You always find problems with everything we plan. Remember last Christmas? You insisted the roads were too icy for dinner at my parents'. Turned out to be the mildest December on record. That was different. The forecast. He threw his hands up dramatically. Dad, please, Julie whispered, setting the mugs down with shaking hands. Maybe we could just delay by a few hours. Wait for the storm to pass? Freeman's face darkened. He pointed a thick finger at the meteorological display on my screen. Your father's been doing this for years, Julie. Creating drama, manufacturing excuses. Remember when he tried to talk us out of buying this house because of some inspection report? Heat crawled up my neck. That inspection had revealed foundation issues that cost them $12,000 6 months later. Money I'd quietly loaned them when Freeman's pride wouldn't let him ask the bank for additional funds. The cabin's been reserved, Freeman continued, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he used with difficult clients. Lyman's expecting us. Your dad's just having one of his episodes. Episodes, as if my 43 years of engineering experience, my careful analysis of meteorological data, amounted to some kind of mental breakdown. Julie avoided my eyes, studying the coffee rings on her counter. Maybe Dad has a point about the weather. Whose side are you on here? Freeman's question hung in the air like smoke from a kitchen fire. I watched my daughter's shoulders sag in defeat. You're right. We shouldn't let a little rain ruin our plans. Freeman straightened, victory written across his features. We're leaving tomorrow morning at 8 sharp. Period. He grabbed his keys from the hook near the door, the metal jangling like chains. I'll pick up the extra supplies tonight. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the picture frames in the hallway. Through the window, I watched Freeman's BMW reverse aggressively out of the driveway, tires squealing against asphalt. Julie began clearing the untouched coffee, her movements quick and nervous. Dad, you know how he gets when plans change. The cabin means a lot to him. I stared at my phone's dark screen, seeing my reflection in the black glass. When had I become the problem in every family equation? When had my daughter learned to apologize for her father's concerns instead of trusting them? The house settled around us in uncomfortable silence. An hour later, keys jingled in the front door lock. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, followed by Otis Perkins' gravelly voice calling out like he owned the place. What's this nonsense about canceling our trip? Freeman, who's giving you trouble? I remained seated at Julie's kitchen table, my phone now charging beside an empty coffee mug. Freeman emerged from the garage where he'd been loading camping gear, his father trailing behind like a bulldog ready for a fight. Otis surveyed the kitchen with disapproving eyes, his gray hair perfectly combed despite the late hour. At 62, he still dressed like he was heading to the accounting firm he'd retired from 5 years ago. Pressed khakis, button-down shirt, leather loafers that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I'm not giving trouble, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm trying to prevent it. The weather. Prevent it? Otis's laugh was sharp and humorless. Like you prevented throwing away your pension on kids that aren't even your blood? The room went dead quiet. Julie's dish towel stopped moving across the counter. Freeman's loading of the cooler ceased abruptly. I felt my chest tighten. "What did you say?" Otis stepped closer, his cologne mixing with the lingering smell of Julie's dinner. "You heard me, Clark. All that money you've poured into other people's families over the years. Your soft heart and your checkbook parenting. Look where it got you. Other people's families?" My voice barely contained 20 years of suppressed frustration. "Julie is my daughter." "Is she?" Otis's eyebrows raised mockingly. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're just the bank she calls when Freeman's credit comes up short." Freeman cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Dad, maybe we shouldn't what? Tell the truth?" Otis pulled out one of Julie's dining chairs and sat across from me like we were negotiating a business deal. "Clark, you've been enabling this family's bad decisions for years. First with that ridiculous house down payment, then the car loan. Now you want to sabotage our family vacation because you're afraid of a little weather?" My hands gripped the edge of the table. Julie stood motionless by the sink, her back turned to us, shoulders rigid with tension. "I guaranteed their mortgage because they needed help," I said quietly. "Help?" Otis leaned back, his chair creaking. "You call signing away your financial security help? Freeman's doing fine now. His promotion, the new clients. But you're still treating him like some charity case who can't handle adult responsibilities." Freeman nodded along with his father's words, emboldened by the support. "Clark, I appreciate everything you've done, but Dad's right. We don't need you micromanaging our lives anymore." The kitchen light buzzed overhead, a fluorescent hum that seemed to grow louder in the silence. I looked at Julie's reflection in the dark window above the sink. She hadn't moved, hadn't defended me, hadn't even turned around. "So here's how this works," Otis continued, his accountant's precision cutting through any remaining pretense. "We leave for the cabin tomorrow as planned, or you can forget about future family gatherings. Julie and Freeman have their own lives now. They don't need a paranoid father-in-law creating problems every time they try to enjoy themselves." I studied the pattern in Julie's tablecloth, counting the small blue flowers woven into the fabric. 47 in the section visible from my chair. My daughter had picked this tablecloth 3 years ago, asked my opinion about the color. I'd said it reminded me of the wildflowers her mother used to press between book pages. "Well?" Otis's voice demanded an answer. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice to remain steady. "We'll leave in the morning." Otis clapped his hands together once, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "Excellent. Freeman, finish loading the car. Julie, make sure your father packs appropriate rain gear if he's so worried about the weather." They moved around me like I was furniture, discussing departure times and driving arrangements. No one asked what I thought about sleeping assignments or meal planning. No one wondered if I had other weekend plans they were disrupting. I sat in Julie's kitchen, surrounded by the family I'd spent 2 decades supporting, and realized I'd become invisible in my own daughter's life. Past midnight, I sat in my home office surrounded by documents I hadn't looked at in months. Bank statements, mortgage papers, loan agreements, and canceled checks spread across the desk like evidence in a trial I was finally ready to prosecute. The mortgage guarantee papers were on top. $180,000 of liability I'd accepted without hesitation when Freeman's credit score wasn't quite high enough for their dream house. Below that, the car loan documents, $15,000 for Julie's sedan when Freeman's financing fell through 6 months later. Wedding expenses came next. $8,000 in receipts for a reception Freeman's salary couldn't cover. I picked up a photo from last Christmas, studying Julie's face as she opened the gift card I'd slipped her privately. Another $500 to help with utilities Freeman didn't know they were behind on. In the picture, she was smiling that grateful smile I'd grown to recognize. The same expression she'd worn at 16 when I'd paid for her SAT prep courses. At 22, when I'd covered her student loan payment during her teaching internship. The memory hit me with unexpected clarity. Signing day at the bank, Freeman swaggering about the temporary arrangement, while Julie tearfully thanked me for saving their future. The banker had warned me about cosigner risks, explaining how I'd be responsible if they defaulted. I'd waved away her concerns, focused only on my daughter's happiness. 43 years of careful budgeting, and they called me paranoid for checking weather. I'd handed Freeman a life he never earned, and he treated me like hired help who'd overstepped boundaries. Julie used to defend me. 5 years ago, when her ex-boyfriend criticized my old-fashioned approach to finances, she'd argued that her father's caution had kept our family stable through 2 recessions. Now she stood silent while the Perkins men mocked the father who'd bankrolled their comfortable lives. I pulled out a calculator and started adding figures. Down payment guarantee, $45,000. Monthly emergency fund contributions, $200 for 18 months. Car loan, $15,000. Wedding expenses, $8,000. Christmas and birthday gifts, roughly $1,200 annually for 7 years. The total made my stomach clench. Over $90,000 invested in a relationship where I'd apparently become the problem. My engineering mind began processing the situation differently. Variables, calculations, potential outcomes. What if the money I'd freely given could be strategically recalled? What if Freeman's confidence in his financial independence was tested by reality? I gathered the papers into neat stacks, muscle memory from decades of organizing technical specifications. The mortgage documents went in one pile, loan papers in another. Each stack represented a different kind of leverage I'd never considered using. The weather forecast still showed severe storms approaching the mountains. Freeman and Otis wanted to ignore professional meteorological analysis. Let them. But I'd learned something valuable tonight about the difference between being helpful and being taken advantage of. I packed my waterproof gear with unusual thoroughness, checking every zipper and seal twice. The storm gear would serve me well tomorrow, though not just for the weather Freeman dismissed so carelessly. My phone buzzed with a text from Lyman Grant, our neighbor who owned the cabin. "Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Weather looks rough, but the cabin's well built," I typed back. "See you then. Should be an interesting weekend." Setting my alarm for 6:30, I turned off the office light and headed upstairs. Tomorrow would bring more than just rain to the Appalachian Mountains. It would bring the kind of clarity that only comes when comfortable assumptions get washed away by forces beyond anyone's control. The mortgage papers remained on my desk, organized and ready for Monday morning phone calls. 6:30 came too early, but my waterproof jacket hung ready by the door, like armor prepared for battle. Freeman's horn blared from the street at exactly 7, 3 sharp blasts that rattled my kitchen windows. I loaded my gear methodically. Emergency radio, extra batteries, rain poncho, thermal blanket, first aid kit. Each item went into designated pockets of my hiking pack with the precision I'd learned from 40 years of project management. Freeman could honk all he wanted. Preparation took time. The convoy formed on suburban asphalt, Freeman's BMW leading, my reliable Honda following. Otis rode shotgun with Freeman, probably strategizing weekend dominance while I maintained solitary dignity in my own vehicle. Julie had called that morning, apologetically explaining she'd cover the school's weekend science fair before joining us Sunday morning. 2.5 hours of winding Pennsylvania mountain roads gave me time to think. Freeman's brake lights flashed at every curve, his city driving showing as we climbed toward the Appalachians. My dashboard weather display updated automatically, barometric pressure dropping, humidity rising, wind patterns shifting from the southwest. We stopped at Murphy's General Store in Clearfield, the last outpost before Lyman's cabin. Freeman emerged with beer cases and potato chips while I purchased batteries for my weather radio. The elderly cashier glanced at my radio, then at the sky visible through her window. "Storm coming?" she said simply. "That's what I keep telling them." Freeman banged through the screen door, arms loaded with alcohol and snacks. "Ready to get this party started. Look at this wilderness paradise we almost missed." The final 5 miles wound through dense forest on a gravel road that hadn't seen maintenance in months. Potholes jarred Freeman's suspension, while my higher clearance Honda handled the terrain smoothly. Cell phone coverage disappeared entirely, somewhere between mile markers 2 and 3. Lyman's cabin appeared through the trees like something from a postcard. Wraparound porch, cedar siding, weathered to silver gray, stone chimney releasing welcoming smoke. The structure looked solid, built by someone who understood mountain weather. Lake waters glimmered through the forest beyond. "Look at this paradise!" Freeman jumped from his car, arms spread wide. "And you wanted to miss this over some clouds." I gathered my gear slowly, testing my phone signal. 1 bar flickering intermittently. "Beautiful place," I agreed, shouldering my pack. "But we're really cut off here. Cell service is practically non-existent." Otis stretched beside Freeman's car, breathing deeply. Perfect. Finally, peace from your constant worrying. Lyman emerged from the cabin, gray beard framing a genuine smile. Clark, right on time. Weather's building, but this old place has weathered worse storms. I surveyed the surroundings with an engineer's eye. Sturdy construction, good drainage, trees properly cleared from the immediate area. But the isolation struck me most. No neighbors visible, no power lines, just forest extending in every direction. The landline telephone I remembered from previous visits had been disconnected, leaving us truly cut off from outside communication. Freeman and Otis began unloading beer and camping chairs, with the enthusiasm of city dwellers playing wilderness adventure. Neither noticed the subtle changes I observed: humidity increasing, wind direction shifting, distant clouds building on the horizon. Standing on Lyman's porch, I held my phone overhead, searching for signal. One bar appeared briefly, then vanished. The first clouds appeared over the western ridgeline, still hours away, but moving with purpose. By 2 o'clock, Freeman had appointed himself fire master, constructing an elaborate pyramid of logs that looked impressive, but wouldn't light efficiently. I built a smaller, practical fire nearby, using dry kindling and proper airflow, the kind that actually produces heat instead of smoke. "Dad, you're making us look bad with your Boy Scout skills," Freeman called out, adding another unnecessary log to his architectural masterpiece. The barometric pressure had dropped noticeably since our arrival. I felt it in my joints, that subtle ache that preceded weather changes. The wind had shifted from southwest to northwest, and the temperature had fallen 8 degrees in 30 minutes, classic prefrontal indicators. Otis occupied the best chair, a folding throne he'd claimed immediately upon arrival. This is what weekends should be: no phones, no schedules, no paranoid weather reports. "Guys, we need to keep an eye on those clouds," I said, pointing toward the western horizon where dark formations were building with textbook precision. "What I warned about is starting to happen." Freeman waved dismissively while struggling to light his over-engineered fire. "Stop panicking. It's way too early for storms. Weather doesn't run on your engineering schedule, Clark." "Let the man enjoy his paranoia, Freeman," Otis chuckled from his chair. "Makes him feel important when Mother Nature occasionally proves him right." Julie would have defended me once. 5 years ago, she'd argued with anyone who criticized my caution. Now, her empty chair beside the unlit fire represented everything that had changed in our relationship. The wind picked up suddenly, scattering Freeman's carefully arranged newspaper and kindling across the clearing. His architectural fire pyramid collapsed as paper swirled through the air like oversized confetti. My smaller fire, built with proper windshields, continued burning steadily. "That came out of nowhere," Freeman muttered, chasing paper scraps. I checked my weather radio. Severe thunderstorm warning now in effect for Appalachian regions. Wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour. Large hail possible. Seek shelter immediately when storms approach. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees while we gathered scattered supplies. Dark clouds now covered half the visible sky, moving with visible speed toward our isolated position. Lightning flickered within the cloud mass, still distant but approaching. "Time to douse the fires and head inside," I announced, already moving toward the cabin with my radio. "You're being ridiculous." Freeman started, then stopped as thunder rumbled across the mountains, deep and ominous. Otis struggled from his chair as the first serious wind gust rattled the trees around us. Leaves swirled in miniature tornadoes while branches groaned overhead. The peaceful afternoon had transformed into something electric and dangerous. "Maybe we should listen to Clark this time," Otis admitted grudgingly, his earlier smugness replaced by genuine concern. Heavy raindrops began falling, fat and warm, spattering against our clothing and hissing against the hot coals. Within seconds, the scattered drops became a steady sprinkle, then something more urgent. Freeman grabbed his beer cases while I secured the emergency radio under my jacket. Lightning flashed closer now, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the mountain itself. The storm I'd predicted 12 hours earlier was arriving exactly on schedule, with exactly the intensity I'd warned them about. We hurried toward the cabin as the rain intensified, our weekend paradise transforming into something that demanded respect rather than casual enjoyment. I brought up the rear, weather radio crackling with updated warnings, feeling vindicated but taking no pleasure in being proven right. Rain hammered the cabin roof like machine gun fire, while wind rattled every window frame. Inside, we huddled in Lyman's main room. 4 people compressed into a space that felt smaller with each lightning flash. The storm had reached full fury, exactly as I'd predicted, and everyone knew it. "Well, now you can see what I was concerned about," I said quietly, adjusting the volume on my weather radio. "This is exactly what the Weather Service predicted." Freeman stopped his restless pacing long enough to glare at me. "Clark, just shut up. We get it. You were right and we were wrong. You don't have to rub it in." "He's always such a genius after everything goes to pieces," Otis snapped from his claimed armchair. "Never before, always after." Lightning illuminated the windows every 15 seconds, followed by thunder that shook the cabin's sturdy frame. Rain streamed down the glass in sheets, making the outside world invisible. The temperature inside had dropped noticeably, and our breath was beginning to fog slightly. "Can we please just focus on staying safe?" Julie's voice came through clearly despite the storm noise. "We're all here together. That's what matters." I studied the weather radio's display. Wind speeds now exceeding 60 miles per hour, with no sign of the storm weakening. Through the window, I could see tree branches bending at dangerous angles, some already snapped and scattered across the clearing where we'd been sitting 20 minutes earlier. Freeman resumed pacing, his earlier excitement replaced by frustrated energy. Being wrong publicly had always triggered his worst impulses, the need to reassert control through aggression or blame shifting. Confined in this small space with nowhere to escape, his agitation was becoming palpable. The cabin's lights flickered ominously. Lyman had mentioned that power outages were common during storms, and the backup generator had been broken for months. We had flashlights and battery-powered lanterns, but losing electricity would make our isolation complete. "Look at this mess," Freeman gestured toward the rain-soaked windows. "Cars are probably getting flooded out there. I should check if I left the windows open." Otis peered through the storm-darkened glass. "Mine too. These mountain storms are worse than city weather." I unconsciously touched my waterproof jacket hanging by the door, then checked that my phone was secure in the inner pocket. The device showed no signal bars, but its weather app still functioned, confirming what my radio reported. This storm would continue for hours. The cabin creaked under wind pressure, a sound that spoke of sturdy construction being tested. Rain found small gaps around window frames, creating tiny waterfalls that pooled on Lyman's hardwood floors. Every few minutes, a particularly strong gust would shake the entire structure. Freeman stood at the largest window, staring at our vehicles barely visible through the downpour. Water was already pooling around the tires, and leaves plastered the windshields like natural camouflage. "I definitely need to check those car windows," he said again, his voice carrying something beyond simple concern about weather damage. Freeman turned from the rain-streaked window, with calculated concern etched across his features. "Clark, you've got the right gear for this weather. Mind checking if we left any car windows open? Rain could ruin the interiors." I looked up from my weather radio, noting the subtle satisfaction in his voice. "Sure, I can handle that." The request seemed reasonable. I was properly equipped while the others wore light clothing unsuitable for the storm. Methodically, I pulled on my waterproof boots, then my heavy-duty rain jacket with its sealed seams and adjustable hood. The zipper closed with a solid click that spoke of quality engineering. Otis watched from his chair with unusual interest, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Take your time out there," Otis said casually. "Make sure you check everything thoroughly." The storm hit me like a physical wall when I opened the cabin door. Wind gusts exceeding 65 miles per hour made each step a calculated effort, while rain struck my face with needle-sharp intensity. Visibility dropped to perhaps 10 feet through the gray curtain of water. Both vehicles sat in the clearing like abandoned islands. I approached Freeman's BMW first, testing each window systematically, despite the lightning illuminating the scene every 20 seconds. All secure. My Honda required the same thorough check. Every window properly closed, doors locked tight. The temperature had dropped to 45 degrees, but wind chill made it feel much colder. Even my quality gear couldn't entirely block the penetrating cold that seeped through microscopic gaps in the fabric. I returned to the cabin door, rainwater streaming from my jacket in small rivers. "Hey, open up! Both cars are secure. Windows closed, doors locked." Silence answered me, except for the storm's relentless noise. I knocked harder, then tested the door handle. Locked. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see Freeman and Otis standing in the warm, dry interior, watching me struggle with obvious amusement. Maybe stand out there a while and think about your place in this family? Freeman's voice carried clearly through the glass, his tone dripping with cruel satisfaction. Otis leaned closer to the window, his gray hair perfectly dry while mine plastered against my skull. A little humility lesson never hurt anyone, especially know-it-alls. Understanding crashed over me like the cold rain. This wasn't about car windows or storm protection. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty designed to put me in my place. They'd planned this moment, waiting for the perfect opportunity to demonstrate their power over the man who'd bankrolled their comfortable lives. I knocked again, harder, my gloved fists striking the wooden door with increasing desperation. "This isn't funny! Let me in!" Their laughter reached me through the storm noise. Two men enjoying the sight of their family benefactor, reduced to begging for shelter. Julie's shadow moved in the background, but she made no move toward the door. Rain found its way past my gear's defenses, trickling down my neck and pooling in my boots. The storm showed no signs of weakening, and hypothermia became a real concern as minutes stretched into a quarter hour of locked-out humiliation. I tested the door handle one final time, knowing it would remain locked until they decided I'd learned whatever lesson they thought I needed. Through the window, Freeman raised a beer bottle in a mocking toast while Otis settled back into his comfortable chair. Turning away from their warm sanctuary, I looked toward the forest path that led deeper into the mountains. 43 years of putting family first. And this was how they showed gratitude. I stood in driving rain, locked out by the very people I'd financially supported through every major life decision. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd used my own competence against me, sending me out precisely because I was prepared for conditions they couldn't handle. My phone showed no signal bars, but I knew mountain topography well enough to understand that higher elevation might provide better coverage. The forest path led uphill through dense trees that offered some wind protection, though branches heavy with rain dumped additional water with each gust. I moved carefully through the muddy terrain, using my engineering training to read the landscape. Fallen logs created natural bridges over swollen streams, while rock formations provided temporary shelter for checking my phone's signal strength. The device remained stubbornly disconnected, its screen showing only the emergency services option. They thought I was helpless out here. Freeman and Otis had calculated this humiliation based on their assumption that I'd stand shivering at their door until they chose to show mercy. They'd underestimated the man who'd spent decades solving complex problems under pressure. I co-signed for their house, paid for their wedding, covered their debts when Freeman's credit proved insufficient for adult responsibilities. Every financial crisis had brought tearful calls and promises of temporary assistance. Yet here I stood, soaked to the skin, while they celebrated my misery from their warm shelter. The path curved upward through a stand of pine trees that blocked some of the horizontal rain. My phone buzzed briefly, not an incoming call, but the device recognizing a fleeting signal. Progress. The tower serving this area would be positioned on the highest accessible peak, probably southeast of my current location. 20 minutes of careful navigation brought me to a small clearing where the forest opened to reveal storm clouds beginning to break apart. My phone screen showed a single precious bar of signal strength, enough for essential communication if I positioned myself correctly. Water dripped from my jacket cuff onto the screen as I scrolled through my contacts. The cold was beginning to penetrate even my quality gear, but hypothermia remained manageable if I worked quickly. My fingers, though stiff, still functioned well enough to operate the touchscreen. Amos Knight's number appeared in my contact list. Attorney, longtime friend, and the one person who could help me transform tonight's humiliation into strategic advantage. The legal documents I'd organized Friday night weren't just papers. They represented leverage I'd never considered using until Freeman and Otis showed me exactly what our family relationship meant to them. One bar of signal. That's all I needed to change everything. Rain dripped steadily from my jacket sleeve as I wiped the phone screen clean, revealing Amos Knight's contact information. My finger hovered over the call button while I positioned myself in the clearing center where the signal held strongest. One bar flickered occasionally to zero, then back again. Enough for a conversation if I managed it carefully. The call connected after 4 rings. Amos Knight speaking. Amos, it's Clark Daniels. I need you to file immediate withdrawal of my mortgage guarantee for Freeman Perkins. My voice carried clearly despite the storm noise diminishing around us. Clark, hold on. Are you certain about this? It's not reversible once filed. What's happened? I shifted position as the signal wavered, using my body to shield the phone from residual rainfall. They've made their position clear. I'm no longer family. I'm just a financial resource they can humiliate when it suits them. Static crackled briefly before Amos's voice returned, professional concern evident in his tone. The bank will likely demand immediate refinancing or payment. Without your guarantee, Freeman's credit won't support the current mortgage terms. Perfect. Let them find out what their house is really worth without my backing. Papers rustled in the background as Amos accessed files remotely. I can process electronic filing within the hour. The bank's automated system will notify them first thing Monday morning. Are you absolutely sure about this path? The wind was dying down, though rain continued steadily through the forest canopy. My phone battery showed 60% remaining, enough for this crucial conversation and whatever follow-up calls might be necessary. Completely sure. I've got the account numbers memorized if you need verification. I rattled off the digits from memory, numbers I'd reviewed obsessively during Friday night's document session. That confirms it. Clark, this will likely force immediate sale or refinancing. Freeman's income alone won't qualify him for anything close to the current mortgage amount. Through the trees, I could see faint lights from Lyman's cabin, where Freeman and Otis probably assumed I was still standing helplessly at their locked door. They'd calculated wrong about my resources, my capabilities, and my willingness to accept their version of family dynamics. Process it immediately, I told Amos. Send confirmation to my email once filing is complete. Done. The papers will be submitted tonight. Bank notification goes out automatically Monday at 8 a.m. Amos paused, his friendship overriding professional detachment. They're going to be scrambling by Tuesday. I ended the call and immediately scrolled through my contacts for the next number. Storm clouds were breaking apart overhead, revealing patches of darkening sky where stars would soon appear. The weather was clearing, and so was my path forward. Lyman Grant's number appeared on my screen. The clearing seemed brighter somehow, as if the storm's departure was illuminating possibilities I'd never considered before tonight's humiliation. Without hesitation, I scrolled to Lyman Grant's contact information, while residual raindrops still fell from the clearing's pine branches. The second call required even more precision than the first. This conversation would destroy Otis's livelihood based entirely on information I'd overheard during their family discussions. Lyman Grant speaking. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult business decisions. Lyman, this is Clark Daniels from Maple Street. I have concerning information about your employee, Otis Perkins. A pause. Papers rustled in the background. About Otis? What kind of information, Clark? I positioned myself carefully to maintain the flickering signal while shielding my phone from the last drops of mountain rain. I overheard him bragging to his son about redirecting company funds for personal emergencies. That's a serious accusation. Lyman's tone shifted to professional concern. Are you certain about what you heard? He mentioned specific amounts, $2,800 last month, $1,500 the month before, said it was temporary borrowing, the books wouldn't show. The figures came from memory, details Otis had shared with Freeman during one of their strategy sessions about managing Clark. Static crackled briefly before Lyman's voice returned, sharp with focus. Did he mention any account numbers or procedures? Something about adjusting quarterly reconciliations. He seemed proud of his cleverness, like it was a skill Freeman should admire. I kept my voice neutral, reporting facts without editorializing. I'll need to conduct an immediate audit. The sound of computer keys clicking carried through the connection. This requires investigation first thing Monday morning. If what you're telling me is accurate, I understand the implications. My phone battery showed 50% remaining, enough to complete this crucial conversation. I wouldn't make such a call lightly, but as your neighbor, I felt you should know. I appreciate your honesty, Clark. This kind of behavior, if proven, violates every company policy we have. Termination would be immediate and legal action possible. The clearing around me was returning to peaceful evening sounds as the storm moved east toward other mountains. Crickets began their tentative songs, while overhead, The first stars appeared through breaking clouds. "I trust your judgment on how to handle it," I said. "Just thought you deserved to know what's being said in your employees' family circles." After ending the call, I made my way back through the forest paths with careful steps. My waterproof gear had served its purpose, but I was ready for dry clothes and the warmth of civilization. The cabin lights grew brighter through the trees as I approached, yellow rectangles of comfort that no longer held any welcome for me. Freeman opened the door as I reached the porch, his earlier smugness replaced by casual friendliness. "There you are. We were starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost out there." "Just needed some air after the storm," I replied, hanging my wet jacket on its designated hook. "Beautiful night once you get above the tree line." Otis looked up from his comfortable chair, raising a beer bottle in mock salute. "Teaching old dogs new tricks, eh, Clark? Maybe next time you'll listen when we tell you not to worry so much." I smiled pleasantly and settled into an empty chair, watching Freeman joke about weekend adventures while internally counting down the hours until Monday morning's revelations. Sunday passed quietly, with everyone returning to their normal routines, nursing mild hangovers and sharing embellished stories about surviving the mountain storm. I maintained my usual demeanor, reading newspapers and tending my garden while Freeman and Julie recovered from their weekend adventure. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a well-calibrated machine. At 8:30, while I enjoyed coffee and reviewed stock market reports, Freeman's phone rang at his breakfast table 3 miles away. Freeman Perkins speaking. "Mr. Perkins, this is Sarah Chen from First National Bank's mortgage department. I'm calling regarding your home loan account ending in 4847. Freeman paused mid-bite of his toast. "What about it?" "We received notification that your co-signer, Clark Daniels, has filed for guarantee withdrawal. Without his financial backing, we need immediate proof of independent qualification or alternative payment arrangements." The silence stretched long enough that Sarah repeated his name. "Mr. Perkins, are you there? What do you mean the guarantee is withdrawn? Who authorized this?" "Mr. Daniels filed withdrawal papers Saturday evening through our electronic system. As co-signer, he maintained the right to withdraw any time with proper notice. Your account now requires independent financial qualification within 30 days. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Freeman's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail, then again. By the third call, I answered. "Good morning, Freeman. Clark, what have you done? The bank says you withdrew the mortgage guarantee. They want full qualification or they'll start foreclosure proceedings." "That's correct. I filed the papers Saturday night." "You can't do this. We had an agreement." "We had an arrangement. I could withdraw any time as co-signer. I chose Saturday night." I kept my voice level, engineering precision applied to human relationships. "But why? Over some stupid weekend joke? Over learning my place in this family? You taught me exactly where I stand." Julie's voice joined the conversation from the background, high with panic. "Dad, what have you done? We could lose our home." I heard Freeman hand her the phone. "Dad?" Her voice cracked with confusion and fear. "Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. Julie, I'll always help you, but your husband needs to learn that actions have consequences. You can't destroy our lives over a prank." Freeman had reclaimed the phone, his voice climbing toward hysteria. "I can, and this is just the beginning." I ended the call and turned off my phone. Through my kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Patterson watering her flowers next door, oblivious to the financial earthquake occurring 3 neighborhoods away. Within an hour, Freeman's BMW turned into my driveway, with Julie's sedan close behind. Heavy footsteps approached my front door, with the deliberate weight of someone preparing for confrontation. Through the window, I recognized Otis Perkins climbing my porch steps, his usually perfect posture replaced by the hunched shoulders of a man carrying devastating news. His knocking came in sharp, angry bursts that rattled the frame. When I opened the door, his face showed the hollow exhaustion of someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed in a single morning. "You destroyed me!" Otis's voice cracked with a combination of rage and disbelief. "Lyman fired me because of your lies." I stepped onto the porch, coffee mug still in hand, maintaining the calm demeanor I'd cultivated through 40 years of solving complex problems. "Lies?" I reported exactly what I heard you tell Freeman about borrowing company money. "You can't prove anything? It's your word against mine." "I don't need to prove anything." I took a measured sip of coffee while studying his desperate expression. "Lyman found enough evidence in one morning's investigation. Amazing what a thorough audit reveals when someone knows what to look for. Otis's hands shook as he gripped my porch railing. At 62, losing his primary income source meant more than professional embarrassment. It meant financial devastation, with no realistic recovery options. You'll regret this. Family doesn't destroy family. Family doesn't lock family members outside in storms either. I set my mug on the small table beside my door, the ceramic clicking against wood with finality. You taught me exactly where I stand in this family hierarchy. I need that job, Clark. I have mortgage payments, car loans, retirement planning. His voice dropped to pleading, the authoritarian accountant replaced by a desperate old man. You should have considered those obligations before redirecting company funds for personal use, and before deciding I needed a humility lesson in freezing rain. Otis stared at me as understanding dawned. This was planned. You orchestrated everything. Saturday night provided excellent clarity about family relationships. I simply acted on that information. I picked up my coffee again, noting how the morning sun illuminated his defeated posture. Freeman taught me about consequences. You taught me about respect, valuable lessons. This is insane. Over a weekend prank? Over 43 years of being taken for granted by people who think generosity equals weakness. I met his eyes directly, engineer addressing failed calculations. You assumed I was helpless. You were wrong. Otis stepped backward, recognizing that no argument would change my position. His shoulders sagged further as the full scope of his situation became clear. Job lost, reputation destroyed, financial security eliminated. Now you know your place, I said quietly, completing the circle that began with his mocking words Saturday evening. He turned without another word and walked to his car with the careful steps of someone whose balance had been permanently altered. I watched his departure from my porch, coffee still warm in my hands, morning sun highlighting the orderly progression of my neighborhood, where respect mattered and consequences followed actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Julie. Dad, we need to talk. Just you and me. I typed back, come over anytime. I'll always help you, sweetheart. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.